Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Dom Robinson. Welcome to SM Advanced Forum, your monthly roundup of all the views and opinions from experts across the industry in the streaming, business and technology sector. I am, of course, as always, joined by my erstwhile co-hosts, Tim Siglin and Mark East, and Eric will be along later or may not make it. He's a little medical thing to attend to. But first, let me hand over and find out how Tim's doing. Tim, are you there? Are you alive? Are you all right?
I am, and this is the day prior to the day that we celebrate what you called Colonial Reduced Liability Day, or as we know at the 4th of July. So it seems like there are a lot more fireworks going off earlier this year. There's sort of this unwritten rule here that you don't do fireworks until the day of, but all week I've been hearing loud booms, and it's not just because I live in the mountains of Appalachia. I know it's not moonshine stills going off because they have a particular reverberation. But let's see, from a work standpoint, Wowza published a professional services survey that I had been working on actually back sort of just as COVID kicked in back in March. That came out. Interestingly, for large companies in that space and small companies in that space, there's sort of a nice correlation. I'll talk about that a little bit later today. Let me hand it off to Mark for the moment. And Mark, how are the littles doing, and how's business going for you?
The littles are completely out of hand as usual, but they're adorable. They're massive and loud and strong and strapping. Both of them, even my daughter. But no, things are good. We're actually turning down work officially as of this morning, so things must be pretty good. We've got a few very large projects on the table right now that have just kind of materialized over the past couple of weeks. So that'll keep us busy actually through the end of the year. So things have turned a corner. Nice. But yeah, we're working on some cool stuff, including one project with one of our guests today, Mr. Jeff Kethley.
Oh, nice. Well, that's actually a beautiful segue then into our guests. Jeff, if you'll introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you do and your time in the industry.
Sure. 30 plus years now. It's been the production industry, specializing more towards the video side of things in the last 20 years. The experience is just a full gamut, everything from sound, lighting, video, and then just really kind of moving towards the broadcast space in the last 10 years, even more. And we do have two different companies. One is a system integration company, which is Pizzazz, and then our live sports company, which is broadcasting live sports worldwide, both for world feeds, TV, linear broadcast. Online is a big part of it, in the gaming industry too, because of what we're providing as professional tennis throughout the world. So our main market for that business is North America. So we get to travel considerably, but we actually handle events all over the world. But the biggest part is North America in that business. And luckily, we got the call yesterday too, Mark, that it was time to get back to work. So in August, it's time to get the trucks moving and start rolling some tires.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I've got to keep remembering to spotlight you, Mark, now. Otherwise, we're going to have your interesting looking mask face. But so listen, July the 4th. Why are we celebrating that over here in the UK now? I don't understand. It's because is this something to do with Hallmark? I have no idea what's going on at the moment. It's literally becoming a celebration on Saturday, and I don't understand why.
Because you shed the dead weight of colonial America, of course.
Looking back, I wonder if that was a good thing.
You know, it's funny. 10 years ago today, I was at Wimbledon for NBC, and it was probably the most celebratory 4th of July. Well, 2 days from now, but the most celebratory 4th of July I've ever spent. They decked out the whole place. The International Broadcast Center was red, white, and blue everywhere. And not because it's also your colors. It was delightful. So yeah, I agree. Even 10 years ago, it was this way.
That was when we had lunch down in Brighton the following week.
That's true. Indeed.
I think it's a good excuse, Dom, for our mutual friend Tim to blow things up as well. So perhaps that's the benefit of the 4th of July, is it's legalized explosions, unlike Guy Fawkes Day, which was non-legalized explosions.
It's going to be horrible here on Saturday because they're trying to reopen the pubs and the bars this week. So yeah, on Saturday. So it's gonna get.
All right.
Yeah, we all tried that, and we're closing them again. You should not do that. Don't do that.
Which is ironic, Mark, because a number of those places were set to reopen July 6th, thinking hopefully they could miss the celebration. But now it seems like some of those even are being told to stay closed, at least for the next couple of weeks or so. Let me, before we get completely sidetracked on that topic, let me go to somebody who's been, in the broadcast space as well for quite some time. CJ, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, guys. My name's CJ Leonard. I'm currently in beautiful Astoria, New York, where we've been having fireworks all week, trying to keep people from congregating in large areas, anything like that. So we had ours in Long Island City, I want to say Monday night. So I'm kind of afraid to leave the state because they're closing down. They just added another 9 states to the list of quarantine states. If you come back to New York, you've got to hang out for 14 days. So but yeah, no, I'm from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. I headed there tonight. My career started out broadcasting in college. I was working for the local stations out in middle of Pennsylvania. Got the bug in radio, decided there wasn't enough jobs, and kind of moved into television. Saw all of that, and during the 08 recession, timely messaging here. 08 recession, decided after a layoff that it was time to move to digital because I'd seen what was happening at the local stations. You had to do 3 jobs to survive, predators, things like that. And, been in ad operations for the last 10 years here in New York. I've worked for CBS, NBC, and probably just about every local affiliate in the nation in some way, shape, or form. I'm currently with a company called Magnite, formerly from the Telaria business. We're focused on CTV. We've merged with Rubicon earlier this year. And while my opinions are my own, I'm excited to be in the SSP space because believe that a lot of the technology on the digital side, we're retrofitting what's happening on linear eventually. So I come from, you have to understand where you've been to know where you're going. And I'm fortunate to have, done everything from working in master control and filling logs on the linear side to dealing with data management platforms and understanding contextual and so on and so forth. So there's and just to your point, this day in history, I was at Live 8 backstage representing my radio station and interviewing Chris Tucker in Philadelphia. So big day, big week for us here in the US. And that's a personal this day in history.
Nice. So you say middle of Pennsylvania, is that like Harrisburg, Johnstown, or a little closer to Philly?
Bloomsburg, University of Pennsylvania is where I did undergrad. And then I didn't think I would cross this street in Philadelphia. I'm from the suburbs, so I'm actually not allowed to say I'm from Philadelphia, but I think I've spent enough time there to say so. No, went to school in the middle of Pennsylvania and then went back to grad school for television management. I thought I would be a TV producer in LA, and I wound up being a director of operations in New York. So someone once told me I was a line producer of advertising, so that made me justify my student loans all these years. And fortunately, this career didn't exist. I went back to my college back in February before COVID really kicked in. This career didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. So I find myself fortunate to, we're the scrappy bunch in ad operations for digital, but and traffic and linear too. I find myself fortunate to have been able to work with all the largest broadcasters in the country and even internationally, getting involved. Our current company is global. So again, coming from the 10-year-old watching Empty Nest and Golden Girls on a Friday night to now trying to make sure that those streaming channels like LAT and all, whatever's coming out have their ads. It's an interesting path.
Nice. And I totally know about the Philly suburbs thing because I worked for the World Trade Center Association, and our Philadelphia World Trade Center was actually across in Camden. So, you would say Philly, and then you'd have to explain to somebody, yeah, you have to drive across the bridge to come see us.
Well, the best views of Philadelphia are from Camden, so.
That is definitely true. All right, so Dom, you have a topic with a single word called traffic that you had put up on our list. And there's a whole lot we could talk about on that, but give us sort of your angle and what article caught your attention on that. And you may be muted.
Again, hello, there we go. I've got two
There you
mute.
go.
I pressed the extra on. Right. So this was the article that sort of I flipped. But I don't know about you guys, but I've heard what I think is frankly quite a lot of nonsense from our sector over the last few months about traffic. And that's at both extremes. There's claims about the internet creaking under the strain of people staying at home and using it. And also there's at the other end of the extreme, there's people who are sort of claiming that nobody's, that it's making no difference. Now, I think there's a number of things going on here. One is that people really confuse peak internet capacity and background internet capacity. So a lot of networks have spent the last few months reporting that they've seen 30, typically the number given is that they've seen 30% traffic increase. Oh, hey, Karum, hey, Westdock on the chat room. From what I can work out, that traffic increase is background traffic. It's not peak traffic. So actually, when you've got something that's built to take a peak that's, say, I don't know, 25 times higher than your background traffic, having a 30% increase in background traffic is almost inconsequential, and it's certainly not making the internet creak. And people don't really understand that. And what I'm seeing is some really bad mis-selling from our sector into the sector, focused on trying to say we're going to optimize on bit rates, or we're going to be delivering different types of open up your networks more, or for example, the big discussions that Netflix and YouTube have been removing their peak bit rates and so on, because otherwise the internet was going to fall over. It's just not true. It's not even a debate. It's just not true. I think I brought this up in last month's SMAF. I sat in on the Internet Service Provider Association quarterly meeting. Obviously, traffic was pretty much the first point on the agenda. And because there were no peaks, because there's no live sporting events, because the big sort of concentrations of traffic just weren't happening, they were talking about background traffic, but you're talking, as I say, you're talking about a sort of 30% increase where there's just of base traffic, where there's just an enormous amount of overhead left. So while it was nice marketing for Netflix and YouTube to help everyone out by freeing up the internet, and it obviously saves them a ton of money not having to deliver UHD, 4K, and all these other sort of spurious formats, which frankly no consumer can tell the difference between 1080p and 4K. It's just saving them a ton of money, where for the previous 4 or 5 years they've been chasing, oh, we've got to put this high-end badge on, we've got to put this top quality tide mark on what we're doing. And actually it's given them an excuse to say, do you know what, if you want the 4K or you want the UHD, you're going to have to lean forward and opt into it. We're not just going to push it at you so that we can say everything's UHD anymore, or HD. So it's one of those things that's kind of continuing to really annoy me. I'm getting people saying, oh, you know about the CDN industry, isn't the internet reaching capacity? And it's coming from people in the industry itself, and that saddens me and infuriates me. So I thought that would be my naysayer starter for 10 for SMAF this month.
Well, and let me add too that after Content Delivery Summit last month, I handled the Streaming Media East Connect, where we talked about AV1. We had somebody from Netflix, Mozilla, Vimeo, etc. They also brought up the point on getting better quality out of 1080p 60 with HDR versus necessarily just moving to 4K, and how that, nobody said it's a marketing trick. What they said was we don't have capacity issues because we can implement things like HDR as opposed to implementing 4K and give consumers something that they feel is better. So from a guest standpoint and Mark's standpoint, are you all hearing similar concerns? People are afraid that because we've got so many Zoom events going on or so many live events that we're actually running into the potential of breaking the internet? Or is this, as Dom says, sort of just hype for companies who want to sell you a better network shaping solution. Nobody wants to. So go ahead, CJ.
No, I'll say I get what you guys are saying. I've heard both sides of the coin. It's not the space I generally operate in, but I did hear that some governments were asking companies not to do 4K, things like that. But to be honest, it's not really impacted my world, to be honest.
So Jeff, as you guys start back into live sports, I mean, I don't know how you sort of intersect with some of these OTT platforms because I don't know that much about your business, but is it sort of expected that content gets moved in 4K, or is 1080p 60 because it's got a higher frame rate for sports a better overall scenario?
We actually produce in 4K on the local side, so everything from lens to encoder is 4K in our workflow. That is a requirement by our main client. Our main client, though, is gaming, so it ends up going way down in quality and gets compressed severely. So I know that was something that they were talked about is eventually going to 4K for the gaming side, for the betting houses and stuff that guys like Dom get to enjoy overseas that we don't have necessarily here in the States. So that's one of our primary distributions, but we're having to, quote, dumb it down to 1080i whenever we are broadcasted to terrestrial here in the States. So when we go to Tennis Channel, for instance, it's just 1080i, and that's backhaul to them over LiveView or something like that.
Huh. Interesting. Mark, you have anything to add to that?
Unfortunately, I'm the victim of further audio issues, so please continue. I will contribute when I'm able to listen to the conversation.
All right, sounds good. Jeff, I'm going to come back to you on a topic, cloud production. I think you mentioned sort of as we started in that you're actively shifting toward cloud production. What's the compelling reason to do so?
Well, we actually have been doing remote production for quite a while, not just what the business calls REMIs or at-home production, which truly now has moved to really at-home production. We call that the really at-home now, because it's not just going back to a master control. You're not transporting content to a master control and then just cutting it there. The traditional REMI model was however many cameras you have, 5, 6, 8, 10, you bring those over, whether it be network over IP or you go over satellite, you bring those back to a master control, you do the production in that master control facility, and you may have 5 or 6 different master controls set up so that you can cut multiple events. It's very efficient, and it's not really about removing jobs. It's about being able to produce more content is where it really comes down to. And you can have your A team multiple times a day on multiple events instead of, okay, well, he can only travel on Friday and he can only do 1 game on Saturday. Now that A guy is doing a game on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, sometimes 2 on Saturday, even in that case. So that's not really the model that we were embracing because of our requirements of doing heavier, higher quality on site. So it's not feasible to carry 5 or 6, 8 cameras over 4K right now. It's just not, it doesn't make sense. So we were actually doing the switching on site, but by controlling it remotely a lot of times. But our camera, one of our big things is our camera operators and our cameras are operated offsite. So we don't actually have camera operators on site spread out throughout the venue. We're operating those from offsite, and that is a complete distributed workflow. So we have guys at their homes with just standard consumer internet, not commercial quality. It's maybe 100 down and 10 meg up, and that's adequate to be able to get a preview for your camera, a multi-view for your camera operator, and the capability to control that camera very, very quickly. From that point, we started spreading out. We started this 2 years ago. So last year we perfected it. We were just like, this is common. And it's like, hey, Willie over here, listen, I'm going to take a little bio break for a little bit. Can you take over my camera? And literally that was the conversations we were having on comms. We're all back on the same IP comm basis and everything. So it was a workflow. Of course, it stopped whenever sports stopped. So we transitioned more so, but I was already looking at it's like the biggest issue is getting all the gear from point A to point B, and then having resources there to set up, technical resources there also to tweak and make sure things are working. But my guys turned out of, instead of being operators, they're now just mostly engineers on site. They're putting out fires. They're not really having to worry about the key part. It's like, okay, well, what if we took that part of that responsibility out of the truck and put it up in the cloud so that we could be more, I guess now that I'm not having to worry about moving trucks, which I have multiple trucks, is like I don't have to move trucks from place to place. Now all I have to do is say, okay, get this content up to the cloud and then use the cloud interface to do everything. And especially in the COVID era where we couldn't, for at first, we couldn't get to our offices. We weren't supposed to be in our offices. So we didn't have a master control room and there's still a lot of places that are still restricted on that. The cloud was very simple, and if you've been around LinkedIn or Facebook and you've seen the guys that are in our industry, they're like, hey, I spun up this software in the cloud and now look at me, I'm mixing it home. And I was like, yeah, that's cute, we've been doing that for a while now, but control your cameras, do replay, do graphics and all that. But the demands right now are these kind of things. That's not demands, but when you start talking about real production, as I call it, something that is sports related or more advanced corporate events where you have roll-ins and tag graphics and all kinds of placeholders and things like that, that's where it gets to be a little bit more demanding, and you need more of a solution for multiple people to do the project, do the job.
But Jeff, sorry to interrupt you. Are you using PTZ and remotely steered?
Yes. Yes, our cameras are using some of your brethren over there. It's Mark Roberts Robotics, or our heads, and they were using Panasonic 4K cameras, box cameras, and shoulder mounts on top of those. So that is basically our normal kit is off this Mark. And the reason I invested in Mark Roberts is at first because I had guys that were behind cameras on courts, and they were there for. Sometimes we were there on a day, 7-8 hours was a short day. But we would be going 10 to 12 hours in a day in the sun, 130 degrees on the court. It was brutal. I mean, it absolutely was. So the first step I saw when I got into the Mark Roberts gear was it's completely IP. Oh, wait, that means I can move control back to the shop or to the bus, or we have a couple tour buses and then we have vans. And so we'd move back to the MCR area. Now they're working in the AC. It allowed my crew a much better quality of service. And then, of course, the end goal to me is I kept seeing is like, why do we need to be on site to operate cameras when we're just wiggling a little joystick? And it's not all joystick, but basically, yeah, that's the thing is we spread out the controllers and now we can actually work from pretty much anywhere.
Are you still using like one man per camera, or are you able to condense your team further?
Yeah, for the most part, it's one person per camera, but we have a couple of new camera operators that I'll keep it simpler here. He has a certain name. It's just like kind of like Hey You, but a different vernacular, I guess I would say. And so we like, Hey You, frame up over here. Well, Hey You is an AI operated camera. So he is tracking by bone structure and by face and everything. He's tracking that B camera at times, or C camera. And so, Hey You, every once in a while gets confused, just like any good camera operator. But for the most part, he helps us lessen the load a little bit too. So, but the operator can sit there and run 4 or 5 Hey You cameras. But at the same time, if we're really wanting to get a good shot, then it's hands-on and it's a person behind the camera. So we're not eliminating jobs. And that's the first part is like, oh, if you keep automating everything like this, like, no. It's not about eliminating jobs. You're just going to do a little bit different job, and you may be able to do more because you don't have to travel as much.
I guess where my lead was I wondered at what point the cost and economics work out that it's cheaper just to permanently install the cameras.
Well, all our events are not at permanent facilities, so everything is, at permanent facilities. I could kind of see that. So if you're talking like working at universities and college campuses and stuff, I could actually see that. But let's face it, they don't really pay anybody anyway because they have students a lot of times work for it, so they're just doing it for learning purposes and such. But as far as us, we're completely setting up everything from the infrastructure for the network to the video infrastructure to the audio infrastructure. Every bit of that is set up Thursday, Friday before the event starting on Saturday or Sunday. So it's all portable. So we have to stay that way.
Awesome.
Temporary.
Jeff, can you tell us a little bit more about some of the tools that you're using, specifically like the cloud platform and how it interfaces
Sure.
with your on-site workflow?
Sure. Now, on the cloud platform, one of the big things about doing everything in the cloud is you have to get the video up to the cloud. So we have a couple different of our favorites there. We are using SRT, which is kind of like what everybody with in the last, say, 3 months, really, especially, is just blowing up. Everybody's saying, oh, SRT, I do that too, because it is a very good platform, but the latency on it's a little bit longer than I'd like it to be for camera control, especially. It's just a little bit harder to follow along if you're following a fast moving player or such, or following the action. So we use NDI Cloud mostly. NDI Cloud's from Siena in the UK, and it is transporting faster and a higher quality than what I could get out of SRT solutions at this time. And we also use another product from MediaLux, which is also converting NDI. So everything on our local area, our sites, we're trying to move into NDI as fast as possible. So we're coming out of the cameras, transferring it over into NDI, and the NDI, the network, is carrying all the audio and video at that point. And that helps us be more flexible too. But once we get that up into the cloud, then we're going into the Siena processing engine, and then the Siena processing engine is tying in. We're able to split out audio feeds. We're able to add more to it. We could do, there's just a lot of things we could do with that engine. One of the things is feeding out through its router capabilities into our vector system, which is, I call it a growed up, I'd say that funnily, is it's a growed up TriCaster, but it's effectively, so many people have heard of the TriCaster from NewTek. It is the VizRT version of a TriCaster, but it's in the cloud. So we're running that on an instance in the cloud, and we were like right at the point of really deploying it, and then we got shut down. So we've been pushing it and doing in corporate stuff with it. I've been doing a lot of corporate type of things and demos and proof of concepts, and it's just phenomenal once you get your head wrapped around the power of, okay, all I do is just turn it on when I need it. I don't have to leave it running 24/7. I turn it on when I need it. My content's already there. I just click a couple buttons, and I'm sitting there using that interface just as if I'm sitting behind a monitor that is plugged directly into a box. It's amazingly life-changing. And then the other side of it too is, we have control surfaces that are tied into it, and the control surfaces that we found that worked really well because they're IP based to start with. This is one of them I just unplugged. It's the Scorhoist, and these surfaces allow us to talk directly via IP directly to the cloud instance, and it is literally, like I said, it's like you're sitting in front of it. The mouse response, the keyboard response, there's no delay. And with the control surfaces, you can punch around cameras just as if you're sitting at a normal desk at a normal MCR.
And just out of curiosity, what's the control protocol for that surface to the cloud platform? Is that the NDI KVM thing, or?
No, it's straight up IP. So it's talking to the IP address on the cloud platform and going through a certain port. And so we open up that port and we talk directly to it. Most of the time, though, I'm finding myself going and I'm putting in VPNs just for protection and a little bit of simplicity on our side too, so we can move files back and forth.
But is the control happening over some like proprietary API, or is it an established protocol?
It's their protocol. So I mean, well, every TriCaster or any of the devices they support, which Scorhoist supports hundreds, whether it's cameras or hardware, anything at all, it's talking directly IP to IP. So Blackmagic switchers, routers, whatever. So it's talking directly to the IP port on that device. It just happens to be as our IP ports are in the cloud.
And I'll add to that, Mark. I think there's, I came out of industrial systems integration. It's amazing how much RS-422 on Telnet is actually being ridden through the IP boxes these days, because ultimately that way you can use legacy cameras as well that understood 422. It's just a conversion off of IP packets to traditional control. you held that up there a minute ago, Jeff, and I'm thinking, wow, that's like a grown-up JL Cooper, like what we used to try to do,
Yep.
back in the day. So
yeah,
nice. CJ, so we're going to switch gears here for a minute. It was a really interesting conversation, but let's talk about retransmission. I think that was one of the topics you threw up there. Explain that for our audience who may not have grown up around the broadcast world. What exactly is retrans, from a business and marketing standpoint?
Well, I'll do my best to explain it, but back, late 2000s, there were two different revenue lines that were developing. It was the digital businesses and then retrans. So I didn't directly deal with retrans, but I think as we look at some of the costs, that boomed. That became a huge revenue line for the major broadcasters. And as we look at, one of the topics was just, the costs going up on some of these services, like YouTube, I think went up a few bucks, things like that. You're trying to, I keep likening a lot of things to that scene in Indiana Jones where he tries to get the skull off the pedestal, and with the same weight. And we're doing that in a lot of ways. And I think retrans is probably impacting some of the cost structures, and we don't even really realize, as we move things off to, different streaming platforms, it's not apples to apples there. So it's the scene in Indiana Jones where I got to still make that same, $1 billion or whatever money is attached to that. And I think that's another aspect of the, why, we're trying to move people forward from this linear set-top box, broadcast, cable model. I personally think we're, just retrofitting the pipes to different devices. But as those pipes change, the dollars have to be the same. People are just going to lay off their entire parts of their team. They have to feel comfortable that there's going to be an apples to apples transition. And I think this kind of leads into the advertising side. I said I started on the broadcast side of the business, radio and TV, and now I've been in digital all this time. You have to understand the workflows of the linear business to understand where their margins are. How can I talk to someone in their language? I can't keep talking digital and without the attempt to reach across the aisle and say, all right, well, this is likened to this, and make people comfortable with that. There's a guy out there right now. His name's Stephen Golis. He's out there. He started out training people for the last several years on the linear side about digital. But really now, if you talk to him, I think he's out there going, well, wait, I got to go back to these digital guys and tell them about linear, because you're just not going to move that $7 billion mountain without knowing where all the piping is, where all the streams are, where your creeks are. It kind of leads back to, you're talking about workflows, for production. Advertising is integrated into the content, right? So, it's interesting to hear how workflows are still very, very divergent. I've worked at some of the biggest broadcasters, and their linear business has been established. They have, you shoot the first hour of the Today Show, and that goes to the central office in Englewood Cliffs, and there's someone putting metadata there. There's also an intern, maybe not now, but in my previous days, there's an intern going back and uploading into a video CMS and managing, and putting that data, metadata onto the content. It may not match. Well, I'm sitting here on the digital side, and it's a mess, because there's that same continuity and control that the linear side has. As much as we want to complain, we need that to get them to come over, because I can't sell them the same package necessarily if I don't have the right data. Trying to make sure I don't run an ad against the against COVID versus healthy topics that that have brand suitability related to them. A lot of this, I'm still very much dependent on the content, on the classification, so forth. Contextual, it's a project I've been working on a lot lately, and how you apply that data. We're to the point before, I don't think that there's necessarily jobs lost. I think we just get smarter. As people look at the robots and I coming from, we're talking about automating so I could sit here and run a camera rather than sitting in the middle of the court at 130 degrees. That's the same thing for digital. I think, we get smarter when we apply data more accurately. I used to pull reports all day long, and I was just pulling. I get all the data, I was exhausted. I couldn't analyze what revenue was coming from what channel and what platform was doing better than another, because I just spent days doing the heavy lifting. So there's a lot of great opportunities out there, I think, for those that are on the streaming side to look at what we've done in linear and say, all right, we can do that smarter. And it might take 5 people to do that one job, but you're scaling it, and we're getting better across the industry, whether it's advertising, it's content creation, it's workflows and CDNs. I think we just get smarter as we go forward.
So a quick question on retrans. I know all the rage a couple of years ago was the OTT skinny bundle. The idea you could cut the cord, and ultimately you're going to pay for your internet, and then you're going to buy one of these skinny bundle packages. In the last couple of months, and I don't necessarily think it's tied to COVID, but you've had Sling TV, for instance, is sort of downsized itself and lowered its expectations. We mentioned the fact that YouTube's raising their prices and like that. Is this a right sizing of retransmission, or is this sort of growing pains in it and people maybe deciding that they don't want to pay even the slightly lower prices for OTT versus a traditional cable package?
That's the side of things that I'm just an observer. As a consumer, I'm getting sick of paying. I was saying before, I'm paying 158. It's going to go up to 200 come September. I love my New York One, and I do love the experience and the stability. I'm always on this side of the coin, on the digital side, saying, TV's been doing it forever. And I know when I turn on, when I see a blip, the things we accept on OTT and CTV distribution is insane. If I saw, one of my edicts this year is kill the slate. I don't want to see another slate on any of the channels. As much as I don't want to see advertising at times, AVOD, I get to watch TV that I might not have otherwise, because it's essentially free for me. Back to your point about retrans, though, we're trying to right size, but at the same time, cable was the only shop in town when it came out back in the 80s, right? That was, this is new and different. Now I think someone used the word democratizing. I don't know. I didn't know what it costs. Before grad school, I didn't know, how all this worked out with each channel charging sub rights and so forth. So I guess my point is, we're democratizing the space, and I don't need to pay $200 for cable. I do need internet. I'll still have Spectrum in my home. But technology has gotten so good that, and I've got too many devices because I'm a TV tech nerd, but, I got Roku, I got Fire, and they all cost me under $50, and I don't have to pay a monthly $5 fee for the box. The experience is getting there. I think I like keeping my box around because I do enjoy the continuity of the experience, but as programmatic ad delivery gets better, as direct ad server delivery gets better, we look at SSAI, server-side ad insertion, and that's, stitching gets better. We are getting better, and we are going to simplify, or complicate, depending on how you look at it, that experience as people move over. We're finally starting to get, I think, because of COVID, the attention that CTV and digital in the TV space deserves.
Nice.
I'm going to chip in with the question, given, and it's possibly topical with July the 4th coming up, but it's sort of a question across the pond here. That price of $200 a month is jaw-dropping to me. What are you guys paying for your monthly combination of premium services, like your music, your TV on demand, your linear, your ISP, all combined, stuff that you subscribe to on a monthly basis that's coming in over IP? What's the sort of totals that you're expecting to pay? Because just preempting your answers, whatever it is, for that much money, whatever it is, I would expect to never see an advert again. And yeah, I reckon all of those services you're buying, you're still getting adverts with as well.
So I can give you ours, Dom. We're paying, when Michelle and I got married a couple months ago and combined households, we're paying $49.99 a month for our internet, which is Spectrum. That's a promo. It would normally be $70 a month. You got Netflix at $13, Amazon, which you sort of have to count the Amazon cost because of Amazon Prime, so that's probably another $12 to $13 a month. Stars, which is a premium movie channel, kind of like HBO, the HBO package. I think that's an additional $9 to $10 a month. We dropped Hulu because we really weren't using that. She desperately wants Disney Plus only because she wants to see Mandalorian, and she desperately wants CBS All Access because she wants to watch Picard. But if you took those particular pieces of content out of the mix, it would be at about what we're sitting, and I imagine that's roughly 100 based on what I just described to you.
Yeah, less the 70. The 70 will bump that up a bit, but just notes there. So would you guys all expect to spend between 100 and 200 bucks a month on your combination of services?
If we're talking about everything, including bundled, like Apple Music or Spotify or what have you, all entertainment bundled plus internet connectivity, yeah, probably, 170 to 200, somewhere around there. I think the sweet spot for, basic television programming, including some premium stuff or mid-tier premium stuff, is probably $65 to $70 at this point. And it's interesting to see, there's actually the article on the Flipboard about YouTube upping their rates to what I think is approximate to a lot of the traditional cable providers. So now we're right back there at that price point, 65 bucks a month for a bundle, which doesn't offer a lot of the same programming as Comcast or Spectrum. So I question who's now buying YouTube TV. I don't understand the value prop anymore.
Well, and I'll add, Dom, that we have internet only. We don't even have the basic TV bundle that Mark is describing, and that is very hard to get when you call a Comcast or a Spectrum. If you say, I just want internet, they essentially push a model that says, for an extra $5 a month, you'll get all these TV channels. By the way, Michelle sent me a text because she's watching this, and she said, yes, we do need to get Disney Plus for more than just Mandalorian. So I shot my hand on that one, apparently. So Jeff, what about you? I mean, what's the model that you pay for, internet?
I've been a cord cutter for years. I cut probably 4 years ago, something like that. I traveled a lot with the businesses, so it just made no sense for us. My family is adjusted. My son and my daughter don't even watch TV. I have to force them to watch a TV. Now they watch content that's different than TV though. It's TV on the second screen TV. I myself, I think we're somewhere around probably $65, $75 a month, but I'm addicted to the same thing. Yeah, somewhere around there. Internet actually in our market's actually fairly affordable, and it's about to get even better because we're getting AT&T fiber in our direct neighborhood. So I'll be pressing that button really quick to get away from Spectrum, Time Warner, for sure.
Sure. Interesting. Yeah, my kids, it's funny, my grown kids now, we cord cut probably 15 years ago, and the first time they watched TV and picked up a remote to rewind something that was happening in live sports, because I had them watch the Super Bowl over the air, they were like, how come we can't go back? I'm like, well, that's called TiVo, and we just don't have that. So.
The numbers you're talking about for your ISP services seem high to me. I mean, I've got a BT Infinity service, so it's fiber to the cabinet and a copper last mile. So I'm typically getting a speed of about 30 to 50 down, about 6 up on my service, and that's costing me about £17 a month.
Yeah, so here it started out when I did the cord cut, we were paying $34.95 a month. So roughly 20, from a pound standpoint, it'd be roughly 22, 23 pounds. It has risen, and this is sort of the CJ's point on the retransmission piece, where we're balancing these models. You had, as people cord cut, and you had fewer people buying the cable packages, then what they would do is they would push the internet only side up. In the States, there's something called regulated versus non-regulated, which is certain services have very sort of specific pricing models that they can sit within, and cable tends to sit within that. But the internet side had been non-regulated, so they had always had traditionally lower prices. Those prices have risen way faster than inflation in the States, to where the average person is paying roughly $60 to $65 just for the internet portion.
Wow, that's quite a surprise to me, actually. I for some reason I just thought you'd got such a large market. I understood that there were problems with competition between, the Comcast and the net neutrality of service provision out there, but I hadn't realised that they were capitalising quite that much on you guys.
So what's interesting in Tennessee, where I live, the states, so a number of the states have attempted to allow municipalities to put in their own internet service provider. And oftentimes they do it under the guise of putting it in where they'll like connect up your electric meter to be able to check how much electricity you've used in a given month. Comcast, Spectrum both have fought very hard against that, arguing that that provided a competitive advantage to the governments. But in the markets where they've been successful in getting that delayed for municipalities, they are the monopolies. What's interesting, in the places where they've not been successful on it, they magically drop their prices to sort of the price range that Jeff is talking about. So competition isn't something that's been consistent in the States, given how big we are in terms of geographies. But we're starting to see that in the ISP space, like we saw it in the mobile phone space. 2 years ago, for mobile phone with unlimited data, I would have paid $80 a month. Now I'm paying about $29 a month for unlimited data on the same towers. So.
A bit more competition in that space. I know, and in terms of advertising in that space, I mean, culturally, we've had this discussion numerous times on SMAF and so on, but I think culturally, you guys tolerate a lot more advertising than we do over here in the UK. If I pay for a service, I don't expect adverts, and if I start getting adverts on my Netflix service, I will unsubscribe. That's why I pay. It's not I'm paying because I'm sympathetic to any shareholders in Netflix. I really don't care about them. I pay because I don't want adverts. Whereas you guys on these premium services, are you still getting interstitial adverts or pre-roll adverts? What's happening on that side of the consumption?
On one of our plans we do, but on another one we don't. So it just depends on the service, because I think CBS is running with advertisements, but my Hulu subscription is without. So it just depends on who we have.
But you pay a premium for that Hulu subscription,
yes,
not to have ads.
But I look at it as it's a premium, yes, but my time is a premium also. So if I don't have to sit there and watch an ad that is completely irrelevant to anything I would ever buy, then I would much rather pay for that to save even 10 minutes of my life through the course of watching a show I want to watch. I'm going to watch it, but I don't want to sit through commercials.
Interesting.
CJ, you have an opinion. Please share.
No, and I guess growing up on broadcast, my brother talks about when MTV went online in the early '80s, and I was a toddler, and just coming in now. I guess you're right. I had an Irish housemate here in New York that we'd be sitting there watching the set-top box, and she'd be like, "Nope, I'm done. I don't have time for this." And whereas I'm just like, well, I'll just go run, take a break, or, I'll sit on my phone. That's my second screen time probably. So I'm just so used to that, and obviously working in advertising, I can't bite the hand that feeds. So, but no, I mean, and I think that, they're working on, what do the commercial breaks look like? I think, just in the trades, Linda Yaccarino at NBC, a lot of great, thought leadership there about what an ad break should look like and so forth. And what does a 6-second ad do? Again, people are still figuring it out. And then now we have COVID. So it'll be interesting to see what we accept in 2 or 3 years now that everyone's, making the switch. A lot of subs are getting lost in favor of streaming services. So I think a year and a half from now, we have this conversation. It'll be quite interesting. But yeah, to be honest, I still have the set-top box and that experience, to the point before, I get all these channels. I only watch like the first 10. I really like it because of the channel clicking, to be honest. When I get home from work, it's a lean back experience, and I can flip through. There's apps out there like Lowcast in the US that will that's a big touchy topic right now, going back to retrans for a second. you donate a little bit of money, or you don't even have to, but you get your local channels. I don't need an antenna on my TV. That's a touchy subject when you start talking about retrans, because that's not necessarily, I'm assuming, I have more homework to do. I'm assuming that those, when an ad airs there, that it doesn't necessarily count towards the GRPs and Nielsen ratings, and there's just a whole nother facet, like everything else in digital, we got to figure out in order to get TV to pull over. And I know you want to talk about ATSC 3.0. I'm watching Lowcast and then seeing what ATSC 3 brings to the table. I think it'll be interesting to see what that technology enables. As soon as it's IP, as Jeff was saying about workflows, as soon as it's IP enabled, advertising is, it's a whole nother game.
Well, and I think you mentioned the you were talking about sort of retrans and how you count from a Nielsen standpoint. I think that's been an issue in the industry the last couple of years, is Nielsen's tried to do multiple digital measurement systems, and each of the major networks over here will have some objection to a portion of the way it's counted. Is it 7 days? Is it 30 days? Etc. Maybe that is the benefit of moving to addressable IP on ATSC 3.0, because ultimately then you have a package that you can sort of guarantee that delivery is occurring across multiple platforms, all of them being digital, even though one of them's a linear transmission. Lowcast, how does that compare to some of the models where people would buy antennas, hook them up to something like a silicon dust box, and transmit MPEG-2 throughout their house? Is Lowcast something that literally just comes straight into a streaming box, or how does that work?
I have it downloaded on my Fire Cube. I haven't tried it on Roku yet. I've got to set my Roku up, but the interface, I think a lot of this too is the interfaces are getting better and better as we go through. Samsung TV has their interface, Apple TV is, they're innovating. But it's an app, and I navigate to it, and it kind of feels like I'm watching, the cable guide that I would normally have, and I can go pick my channel, and it's all my HD2s, which I don't get now with the cable box. If I want to watch an old episode of some random TV show, The Nanny, I'm in Queens, so I'll throw a nod at The Nanny. I could do that. And again, I'm a purist at heart, I think, a little bit. So maybe I'm not in the majority of that opinion, but I do like the fact that Lowcast is there, and I don't need an antenna, and I just put on my Fire Cube, and I don't have these disparate experiences. Mm-hmm. I can log through, the apps. That's the hardest part of the decision making in my television watching is probably the hardest part. I like to just sit there and lean back on the set-top box, but for an extra $100 a month, I don't know that it's worth it.
Fair enough. Mark, the kids are a little young to sort of choose their TV, but from the standpoint of you as a parent, going forward, do you expect you'll add more services that are sort of kid focused, that kind of thing, or do you think you sort of stay within the same range of services that you have?
It's weird. I'm a subscriber to Disney Plus, mostly because I get it for free because I'm a Verizon customer, but and the fact, Hamilton, Friday, Hamilton, baby, all the way.
I've had a number of friends tell me I have to stop everything I'm doing to watch that.
You must, absolutely. I'll talk for hours on it. There's enough programming for every kid age range on Disney Plus that satisfies quite a need. And then the wealth of programming on YouTube Kids, and there's so much programming out there for every age range. I don't think anyone's adding subscription services based on their kids. That if your kids of a certain age, they want to watch TikTok. And that's all they want to watch.
You're right.
You know what I mean? And kids of a different age, they want to, everything they watch is on YouTube. And nobody really wants to watch TV unless it's a movie, unless it's family movie night and you're gonna pop some popcorn and sit down and watch a movie. Then you want Netflix, or you want Amazon Prime, or you want Hulu, or what have you. But other than that, I don't think anyone
or a live sporting event or something like that. That's that's sort of a must see.
For sure, yeah. I don't think unless unless you're, you know, an expat, you know, living in the States, and you're a huge fan of some football team somewhere, and, you know, the family gathers to watch that, so you're subscribing to that very specific SVOD service. You know, I don't think a whole lot of folks are adding anything based on their kids' viewing habits.
Got it. Jeff, I'm going to come back to you with one last question, and then we're going to roll it to Dom because we're coming up toward the end of the hour. But we've lived a life for several months now without live sports. And obviously, one of the things that you consistently hear people say is, I won't cut the cord until I can watch live sports on, you know, some form of OTT package. Do you sense that we've had more people here recently go ahead and make that leap to cut the cord because live sports was no longer something that they had to worry about? Or do you think they're waiting it out until you start broadcasting tennis again, or until the NBA starts playing again?
It's hard to say. I think that there's definitely people out there that have cut every possible cost with it, and so that means cutting the cord to get it down to the very minimum, and then they found content. But from someone that also has, I have DirecTV now, which is what now, AT&T now, which is where I basically would see, quote, normal TV. With that subscription, there's still nothing to watch. I mean, there's no content to watch. So I think people are going to turn on every service they possibly can and watch for live sports. Whenever it starts happening again, they're going to look everywhere for it. And I don't think it's going to be like, I'm just going to turn on ABC, CBS and look for it there. They're going to look on every medium they possibly can to find it, because everybody's starving for it. They really are. At least I feel that way.
Dom, what about in the UK? I mean, Premier League started back up again. I mean, I know you're not a huge football fan, but what's your general sense? Did people essentially say, I'm done watching TV, I'll go to OTT?
Yeah, no, I think I definitely think streaming's dominating. I've got a sort of sense that there's going to be significant recession this autumn globally. I think we've got over here, there was, I don't know, 15,000 jobs announced lost yesterday. And that's going to accelerate because the furlough scheme, I don't know if you had a furlough scheme over there, but basically the furlough scheme it peters out now, ramps down to October. So that's why the jobs are being signed off. So I think that's going to make a difference to disposable incomes. That's going to make a difference to how large production companies consider their internal costs and so on. So I can see there's just going to be a recession, and at the end of the day, people are going to be looking at these two situations where they can keep broadcasting on a traditional broadcast MUX, or they can go OTT. They're going to be looking at the data they can get back from the audience and think, well, at least we know what's going on with the audience online. Let's go and hunker down and focus on that. And so I think UK's live linear is probably facing a pretty bleak 18 months, 2 years for traditional broadcast. That's good news for the streaming space. I think Zoom itself and possibly other formats, but I think it's become a form of entertainment. I think people are spending time socializing online. We spoke about this last month. I think it used to be me and 3 or 4 mates who would have a drink together socially in a virtual environment around a chat room on a Thursday night. And now we're seeing a regular audience of, I don't know, our audience on the radio show is growing from sort of typically 20 or 30 to 150, 200 every night now. And so I think culturally people have really assimilated being in front of an internet connection to socialize and to spend time together. So I think that's going to make a difference. I think, as Jeff said, I don't think there is a return to normal. I think there might be a new normal coming. But I also think there's a second wave coming. You can see it in your data. Certainly the data about America they're publishing over here is probably better than the data you're getting, because the data we're getting here is 90% margin of error. It's just meaningless, the data out there. I don't know what's going on. I'll probably find I'm dead. I have no idea. It's just completely mad at the moment.
Sounds like a Monty Python skit in the making.
Yeah, exactly. It is all a bit bizarre. But listen, we're actually hard up against the hour, and I need to just hit a couple of things. First of all, we've had quite a busy chat room on the website this week. So great to see Kuram, great to see Watchdogs, and our regular chat room host, Mark DJ's in there as well. We must get him back on soon, actually. It's good to see him in the chat room. So sorry if we haven't answered all your questions or relayed them out, but I'll make sure that the crew get to see those and do come back. And I want to do a little bit of a plug, actually. I'm just going to kick this in and do this. Next week, I'm doing a bit of an event. Mark's helped me a little bit with this from his side. The most complicated I've ever, without a doubt. Bit of fun. My little internet radio show, which is purely a hobby, we do on Thursday nights. It's on later tonight. But next Thursday, it's our 9th birthday. And interestingly, next SMAF is our 3rd birthday of SMAF. Which I hadn't realized, going 3 years already. But the radio show's been going nine years next month. And we would always had a dream when we set the radio show up to follow the sunset with live music around the world every Thursday. It's taken us 9 years, but we're doing it for the first time next Thursday. So it's just Icecast internet radio streaming, but it's going to start off at, well, you'll have to use the flyer itself to convert your time zones. But and it is one of the most, I pity the people who did Live Aid now, because programming across 20 hours of time zones is one of the most mentally fatiguing things I've ever done with 23 live acts. So even though the actual streaming itself is reasonably simple, I have to say, doing this with anything more complicated than an Icecast stream would be a headache. So if you're bored next week, tune into that. That's going to be a bit of fun and very geeky and streamy. But I'd like to just highlight we've got Peter and Shabana on next month on the August edition, which is on August 6th. So obviously join us for that. That will be our 3rd birthday, which I haven't made any fuss of because I've only really just realised it's happened. So we'll be making a fuss of that next month. So do tune in for that, and also reach out to us if you'd like to get on. We're going to start programming for the first quarter next year over the next month or two. So if you'd like to get on to SMAF, come and get in touch with us. That would be good. Huge thank you to Jeff. Let me just bring you to the fore without you having to do anything. To Jeff, there he is. And,
glad to be here, guys. It was very enjoyable.
Really good to have you on. Thanks very much. And CJ, you're one of the rare guests who's been on twice now already. So thank you very much for that. That's been really good. And Mark, I hope you managed to prise your microphone or AirPods out of your kids' nappies or stomach.
Yeah, all good now. All good now. Thank you for the assist.
And thank you very much, as always, for leading the conversation. So we've been SMAF, SM Advanced Forum. We're back every month on the first Thursday at 5 p.m. UK, 12 Eastern and 9 Pacific time. And I think with that, I should probably just press the outro button and stop rambling on.